The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with me this evening. To those of you in the great northern hemisphere, to our local friends in Australia, it's depending on where you live, it's either good morning or good afternoon, depending on what the time zone is, and certainly good afternoon to the folks in New Zealand. Good to hear from you. How's the volume, folks? If you could just type in the question box, let me know that you can hear me all right. Volume's getting out okay? Yeah, Kevin's got it. Kevin from Minnesota. Good to have you with us, Kevin. Thank you, folks. Peter's a demon short-term trading expert. Lives up in the Darling Downs in Queensland. I hope he's going to do a tutorial soon. Chase is with me. Chase, this will be a non-smoking webinar, which you will be terribly pleased about. That would mean it would be the first one in the last 20 years, but nonetheless, it will be a non-smoking webinar. I had a terrible thing happen to me 2 weeks ago now, I guess. I got some sort of a bug with a phlegm and a chest infection and all that horrible stuff. And I had to go and see the doctor. And I said, you're looking at a man who hasn't had a day off for sickness in 40 years. But I've just had to cancel some of my work because I can't speak without having a coughing fit. And Falcon, who's with us today, Falcon's from Miami, was the poor student that was doing his tutorial at the time and had to put up with me coughing and sputtering and everything else. So, Falcon, thank you for your forbearance. Falcon was kind enough to let me cancel a couple of tutorials. We've caught up on them now, but it wasn't good. And then at the end of it all, Chase, this will amaze you, the doctor said, well, your smoking isn't helping this. So the smoking's had to be drastically curtailed, and this is a smoke-free webinar, because if I start smoking, I'll probably start coughing, and I don't want to subject you to that. So anyway, thank you. Chase has been a great man, chasing me up for years, saying you want to give that smoking away, it's no good for you. And we all know that. I don't quite know whether I can get to give it away. I've been a chain smoker for 30 years. And I certainly, and Big Mike O says, yeah, you sound better than usual. Good. Oh, Sue's with us. Sue, how lovely to have you with you. Health is important to all of us. We need you to stay well. Thank you, Sue. I'm absolutely in great form now. And I think really Chase and the doc have got something in it. I think if we cut the smokes down, we might do a bit better. I've listened to some of my webinars occasionally, and there seems to be an awful lot of grunting and puffing and sotto voce coughing going on. Anyway, let's see who we've got here. Thanks, we've got a really good crowd today. As usual, our stalwarts, Alan, he's a tutorial guy, so's Albert. Bill, haven't got you yet. Carol, lovely to have you with us, Carol. Carol Betson. We don't get many women on the show, Carol, so we always want to, particularly say hello to women. And of course, I'm a guy, so I like girls anyway. It's sort of a funny thing about me. I know we've got Sue Lee with us. She's a gun trader. She's done the tutorial. She was thrilled. She couldn't believe it after she'd been dabbling with trading for 12 or 15 years. She did the Daniel Code tutorial, and she's so thrilled that she's making money. So, Sue, hope it's still going well for you. If it's not, any of you folks who've done tutorials, shoot me an email. We can always organise a little refresher for you if you're not getting the results you want. So here we are. Let's see who else we've got with us. Yeah, Colin, Danny. Got Danny twice, one offline, one online. Good to have you, David Gillet. Webby, the king of the black lines. Falcon from Miami, who's the guy doing a tutorial. Chris Cady. Chris, nice to have you with us. Harold, he's the gold bug, super gold bug from Redding, California. Let's see what we've got. The last chart today is for you, Harold, so stay to the bitter end, mate. Kevin's the tutorial guy. Good to have you. Matty down in Melbourne. God, I haven't seen you for a long time. Nice to have you with us, my friend. Mike, he's the tutorial guy, the Murph. Mike, the Big O, he's a tutorial guy. Milton. Nathan, Paul. Peter, we know he's a short-term trading guy. We're going to try and make him a stand markets a little bit longer than that. Sue, lovely to have Sue with us. And Sue Assini over there in the Midwest of the United States. And Tom just arrived. He's the wealth manager from Florida. I mustn't say hedge fund. They don't like that. He's a wealth manager. And Trevor, good to have all of you with us. Snowing hard in New York City. Chris, you know, it's a great mystery to me. I live at a surfers paradise, the Gold Coast of Australia, which is sort of the Miami of Australia, but not as intense. Nothing in Australia is intense as it is in the States, thank goodness. But you know, here in winter, midwinter, you might put on a light jumper, and the rest of the day, it's short. The rest of the year, it's short sleeve shirts. We have about 14 days of the year where the heat is uncomfortable, up in that 30 to 32 degrees Celsius. But then it's pretty simple. You just have the world's biggest air conditioner, which I've got. I've got the biggest domestic model air conditioner you can buy. And you just press a button and it all comes good. And then when you get bored with all that, you go outside and flop into the pool. It's pretty cool. But I know a lot of people live in these places where it's really bloody awful and cold. Also get bloody awful and hot as well. And honestly, I don't know why you do it. But anyway, I know the real answer is that 90% of us are, you know, there by destiny. It's family, relations, history, everything else. But I've got a really good argument for you that you should change your life, go somewhere warmer. Okay, let's see. I'm going to talk to you today a bit about change, and that's tempted me with all these changes that we all put up with every day. Microsoft seem to want to upgrade their program every 10 minutes, and I've managed to live through everything from, you know, first Windows that you didn't even have pictures for. You had to know what the code was to make it work, which I didn't. All the way through to Windows 10, I've survived that. And earlier this week, my email program failed, and Terry, who's our IT guy, he runs the website. He's up in Canada, in a nice little town called Chatham. He said, "Oh, well, I'm going to have to replace this thing for you." So I said, "Oh, that's all right." So I had, you know, an Office version, probably about 12 or 15 years old. So he's put in the upgrade. Chris, you live in New York City for the girls, do you? Hey, I'll give you a tip, mate. They're everywhere. Everywhere. Lots of them. Down here as well. Yeah, love those girls. Anyway, so he said, you've got to change this thing. And he's put in this absolute up-to-date Office program. And it's absolutely bloody awful. It's got colour in it. It's got unnecessary things. I mean, you know, it's change for the sake of change. And Vicky's arrived. Hello, Vicky. Good to have you with us. Always, the ladies are always special here. And change for the sake of change, I don't get it. Now, don't be concerned about that, because as I say to my children, there are a lot of things in the modern life that I don't get. And one of them is these mobile phones. I read an article last week, might have been yesterday actually. Time shortens when you're not smoking, Chase. You'll have to excuse me. And it was talking about Nokia mobile phones. And 15 years ago, Nokia were the go. They were the bong, as they say. Doing great, had a lovely little small phone. Sort of pioneered all that small phone stuff away from the old bricks we had. And then, of course, Microsoft, iPhones, Apple iPhone started, and somebody got a very early copy of that and showed it to the guys at Nokia, who are Swedish, I think. They're certainly Scandinavians, might be Finland, and they said, you should copy this, you should at least be aware of it. So their engineers had a look at it, and they said, we don't think this is a good idea, because it's sacrificing battery power for content. And so they didn't go that route. Of course, iPhone, Apple did, and then followed by Samsung, everyone else in the world, and the ubiquitous iPhone type smartphone became the thing. And while all this was going on, I had a Nokia, which I bought, let me tell you now, 10, 18, well, it was well before the time I'm talking about. It wasn't 2015 Nokia were hot. It was 15 years before that, 15 years ago, around about the 02s, 03s. Nokia was pretty hot. Anyway, I bought one for 48 New Zealand dollars, which was about 40 US dollars at the time. And I still have it. And I said to my children as they were going through that growing up stage, and they talked to me about, Daddy, can we have an iPhone? And I say no. You have to focus your mind on one thing at a time. If you want to make a phone call, use the telephone. If you need to have mobility, you can see what I've got. I can make and receive a phone call. And then texting came in. I said, that's great. Nokia can do text. That's fine. Well, what about the GPS? I said, there's a GPS in every one of our cars. It's not to say we have cars that are so new that every one of them has a GPS in them, but you can go and buy a GPS for less than $80, leave it in the glove box of the car, and it's fine. So I used that philosophy as I urged them along, and then eventually it was entirely overcome. So the children both have iPhones. My wife has an iPhone. I still have the old Nokia. And last week I had to buy a battery for it for $25. And that's it. So I've had the same cell phone. I don't use it because I don't know how to use it. It's actually only there for my family to call me if I'm traveling, which I do a little bit. I'm not entirely convinced that these ideas of change are so great, because my phone stays charged for 10, 12, 14 days. Your phones, if you've got iPhones, of course, you've got to charge them every night. So anyway, I'm never going to win that argument, I know. So what I'm trying to do is find where these little, here they are, tools are. So after I've been rambling about all that, let's move on. Change. Well, unfortunately, as Nokia found out, change is, let me see if you've got the right screen here. Yes, you have. Change is going to go on with you or without you. And very interesting to look at the changes we've had in the political scene in US, UK, Britain, and Australia. And what brought me to this view is that I had to ask the question, is it always the obvious? At the last election in Australia, we have two main political parties and lots of little parties, splinter groups. We have two main political parties in Australia, Liberal and Labor. Liberal is not liberal as a US person would understand. It's the opposite. Liberal is in fact conservative, and Labor probably equates to your Democrats, at least as they used to be. They're basically the party of the trade unions and the working man. And at the last election we had here, very close, and the opposition, the Labor Party, started up a scare campaign based on Medicare. And Medicare is the Australian part of the Australian health system. We have a dual health system. You can buy private cover, or if you don't want to do that, the government supplies healthcare to everyone. And they say it's free. Of course, it's not free. It comes out of everyone's taxes. So the taxpayers basically carry the rest of the country, which is pretty much the same the world over. And it's very good. If you don't have private cover, you can have your surgery in either a big public hospital, in the smaller areas, smaller towns. The health service uses the private hospital. I had to have some surgery about 15 years ago. And I was at a private hospital in a nice town in New Zealand called Tauranga. Lovely private hospital, very fancy. And as I went in, the bloke who came in was a chap who'd worked in the timber industry and had his leg crushed. He was there to have a bit of a reconstruction for the leg, and he was in the public system, and he moved straight into my single bedroom in the private system. So it works terribly well, but it's very, very much deep in the psyche of the population. So Labor started a scare campaign saying the government's going to take away your Medicare, or the government's going to change the settings of your Medicare. And this caused a furore. And the then government managed to scrape home with barely a one-seat majority. And now the same thing is happening in the US. From these midterms, the one dominant issue that came up in the exit polls, people who voted some of them go and talk to pollsters, tell them what they're thinking, what motivates them, and the number one issue is healthcare. And those of you who follow politics will know that it's been a huge priority of the Republican Party in America for many, many years to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, Obama's very good attempt at universal health care. The problem with these sort of semi-universal and universal healthcare programs, whether it be Obama's or it be Medicare in Australia or the NFA, the National Hospital, NHA, is it? NHA in Britain? Might be. It's a nationalised service anyway. It's not free. It appears to be free. It's free to the user, but of course the taxpayers are paying for it. Look, and the cost is absolutely massive. And we'll return to that again. But that's my question. Why has it always got to be the obvious? I mean, anyone in the Republican Party who looked further to the east than New York and further to the west from LA and would have realized there's another great big world out there. And that's not a real lot of them, to be honest with you, could have picked up on this emotion of don't touch our medical benefits. And, of course, that's happened in America. I was going to say by accident, but it's actually by skullduggery, because the Republicans repealed a big chunk of the Affordable Care Act, Obama's legislation, which they've hated from day one. But that took out a lot of the ability of the program to cover pre-existing conditions, which is a huge concern for older people. And don't forget, in America, you've got optional voting. You don't have in Australia. Everyone in Australia has to vote. It's compulsory. If we had optional voting here, people are so blasé and turned off by politics, I doubt if you'd get enough to have a decent barbecue party. But anyway, in America, it's not compulsory. So young people, by and large, are totally disengaged with politics, not going to turn up to vote. The people who are going to vote are the people who've got an investment in it, the taxpayers, and particularly the taxpayers who are either getting or hoping to get some form of benefit. And when you say we've repealed this part of the Affordable Care Act and it's affected the percentage of previous emissions that are conditions that are being covered, people are up in arms about it. And that was the number one issue. Well, actually what happened, that certainly hurt the Republicans and hurt them badly. And how Trump or any Republican can say, oh, it was a great win for us, the elections. Well, I don't see that at all. They're going to finish up with 2 more Senate seats, but they've lost the House, and they've lost it in a pretty big way. They've lost a chunk of the gubernatorial stuff. They've lost the governor's houses in half a dozen or more states. I don't see that's any great result at all. But the Republicans then brought to the floor a second part of their bill, which specifically was to replace affordable care, to replace pre-existing condition coverage in a slightly different format, but essentially the intent was the same as the stuff they'd knocked out of the Obamacare. And that was the bill, a lot of you will remember, that went down to 1 vote in the Senate, and it was McCain who came in with the thumbs down who scuttled it. And for some reason that's totally unknown to me, but I'm sure it's clear to people who understand American politics better than me, the Republicans made no effort to bring that bill in and pass it again. So it was a real gotcha moment. And it's a sad commentary on a great man, McCain. He's been a terrific legislator. He's certainly been a great representative of his state. But that was done just out of sheer pique because he hates Trump. and tough. I mean, these things happen. As I say to my children, it's only politics. It's not the most important thing in your life. Okay, so let's see if I can find our little digger down here and move on. This, as I have to tell you, is a new program that Terry's put in, so I can't quite find where all the tools are. So that's what's happened in the US. This is what's happened in the UK. David Cameron, the good-looking young guy there, I thought he was a pretty smart turkey. He's Eton Oxford guy. I thought he was pretty switched on. He had a huge win and actually got the Conservatives, the equivalent of your Republicans, he got the Conservatives into government for the first time in about 40 years, where they could actually rule Parliament on their own without having to cut deals with other parties. That was massive, but he was, of course, the big issue in Europe for the last 40 years has been the Eurozone, in Britain, I should say, as part of the Eurozone. And he was a Europhile. He was right into it, thought it was great, supported it. And then as eventually, with ruckus in his back bench, he was forced eventually to go to the people and have a referendum on whether they wanted to stay in the common market, the European Union market, or whether they wanted to leave it. And that's called Brexit. Britain exits Brexit. And he had that election. And the people, the populace, those of them who voted, it wasn't compulsory, they voted in favour of leaving the European Union. Lots of reasons. I could talk to you for weeks about it. But lots of views, and in my view, almost all of them valid. And he resigned. And then, of course, there was a shuffle to who will replace him. Well, the outstanding candidate in the UK is a chap called Boris Johnson. He's a real character. Got a mop of hair. He's an old Eton Bullingdon Club type guy. Big boozer. Seems to have a number of girlfriends while he still had one wife. Lots of guy, great spirit, lots of fun. Very Churchillian in many ways. He's got a lot of Churchill's mannerisms. He looks a bit. I won't say he looks like him. I'd say he's not unlike him in stature. He's a large, solid guy with a big mop of hair, which Churchill had when he was a younger man. But he's a brilliant wordsmith. He's been a journalist for all sorts of publications for many, many years, including in Europe. And UK GDP has declined ever since the UK joined the EU, says Peter. Yeah, well, we'll have a good look at some of that as we go on. Peter, thank you. Anyway, brilliant speaker, brilliant writer. The obvious guy who'd led the Leave campaign, leave the European Union, but his party wouldn't have him because I think they're scared of him. And they finished up with this dear lady, whose photo is here, whose name is May, Mrs. May. I'm sure she's got a first name and I should remember it, but she always comes across to me as Mrs. May. She's a real grey lady. She was the Minister for Immigration under the Cameron government. She's also pro-Europe, didn't want to support the Leave campaign. So they finished up with a leader who, had never shown any real competence for the job, and just part of the party system. She'd worked her way up over the years. And B, was not at all invested in the idea of leaving Europe. And now that that's all coming to a head, you've got this woman whose political judgment was so bad that when she thought she was doing well, she put down the improved poll figures to her own brilliance. Usual politician's mistake. She called another election, and Britain's Conservative Party lost their majority. They've had to cobble together a coalition with one of the Irish parties to stay in power. So May's pretty much a disaster. And what she's trying to do, of course, is she's trying to present to the British people a Brexit, the plan to exit Europe, that's not Brexit. What she's really trying to do is keep England as closely aligned to the European Union as she can. And that's not what the British population voted for. And every time she comes up with a new plan, one, two or more of her leading ministers resign. I think two more have gone today. So, that's fakery. She wasn't the right person, and she certainly isn't the right person now, and she's getting bashed to pieces by the armies of bureaucrats who sit in Europe, Brussels, polishing the seat of their pants. This should have changed for you now. It has. And this is Boris. Boris is a bit like Trump. You don't have to put his full name in if you're Googling him. Just put in Boris, and this is who you'll get. His name's Boris Johnson. He loves to play the clown. He has been the Lord Mayor of London, huge city. Very invested in getting the Olympic Games to London. He led that program. Very competent guy. Loves to be a showman. Loves to be a little bit of a buffoon. He will be the next Prime Minister of the UK, in my view. So now we go to change in Australia. And what do we have? The guy on the left, Tony Abbott. He's a very good guy, very decent guy, and a real conservative. He heads what's called the Liberal Party. He did head the Liberal Party in Australia, which is not liberal, it's conservative. The Australian Party is Liberal, which is your Republican, Labor, which is your Democrat. It's a conservative party. He was the leader in opposition for many years. He brought down Gillum and Rudd and all those horrible Labor stars, show ponies. And then he did the inexcusable. When he got elected, the huge majority, he did the inexcusable. He actually tried to bring in policies that he campaigned on, one of which was introducing a co-payment for Medicare. It was very modest. I think it was $7 from memory. You're all getting it for free. We can't go on paying for this, supporting it. Just, all these universal health cares. Just lose a bundle and they're just a game for the, I don't want to be unfair to all medicos, but a lot of them just game the system. Pathology in particular, it's ridiculous. And he actually said, I'm going to do what I said I campaigned on, and I'm going to bring in a co-payment. You're going to have to pay $7 towards the cost of your medical appointment. Not that controversial. They've had it in New Zealand for years and years. It's about $11 when I was over there. It's probably 15 now. And that was the end of that. Brought the house down. The voters turned against him. The press, the media turned against him. After I think he went for a while. He had 16 monthly polls. His ratings were going down, and the Liberal Party decided to dump him. They reversed the Medicare co-payment. There's no co-payment. It's still just hemorrhaging money out of the national funds, but anyway, that's what they want to do. That's what they're doing. So they replaced him with this guy on the right, whose name was Malcolm Turnbull. And Malcolm Turnbull is one of the great self-promoters in life. If I tell you he's a past chairman of Goldman Sachs in Australia, you'll pretty well understand who he is. And the lady with him is has been Australia's foreign minister. While Mr. Turnbull, she has been for the last, since Abbott won the election 2.5, 3 years ago. That's Julie Bishop. Julie Bishop, as far as I can figure out, is a professional clothes horse. Being foreign minister, you travel around the country, the world, go to UN things, you go visit China, countries, Italy, Spain, Europe, all wonderful. And she seems to have a new outfit every day, if not twice a day. It's a bit like Melania, except she's not pretty like Melania. Melania is at least a good sort. But you look at their dabblings around the world in these bloody outfits, you wonder what they're doing. And, the penny needs to drop sometimes that directly or indirectly, we, the taxpayers, are paying for all this. You might not think you are, but you are, I can assure you, and so am I. And it's pathetic. So there's been more change in Australia, which is good news. Here's our new Prime Minister. This is the third in a couple of years. His name's Scott Morrison. He's very good in Parliament. That's why I gave you this photo. He's very good on his feet, as they say, which is a prerequisite for Parliament. And he's a marketing type guru. And very affable, very nice. He's got a rugby league club that he follows, and seems to know a little bit about sport, which is probably more important to Australian politicians than anything else. We certainly don't take our politicians seriously, which is why we have to have compulsory voting, I guess. So what's he doing? Well, he's playing the safe game and doing effectively nothing. But, you know, it's these obvious things. It applies to everything in life, including markets. Is it always have to be the obvious? And I'll tell you more about that as we get onto the oil trade as we move further back. So the point Peter raised about how well or otherwise the UK's done, we're going to go through and have a look at US, Australia, and the UK and China, and see what's happening there. Well, Mark's charts tell you a lot. This is the Daniel Code 12-day chart. This is, in fact, a 24-day chart. This is the equivalent to a monthly chart, if you please, of the S&P. This is the index, and good times in the USA. Don't worry about the little pullback at the moment. We'll deal with that later. But overall, it's just been a great, almost a decade now. 2009 was the low. We're into 18 now, and pretty close to 19. So we're not far off a decade of amazing growth, amazing results in the US markets. I've used the S&P because it's a broader measure than using the Dow. So that's what's happening in the US. It's great. You've got Thanksgiving coming up. Don't forget. I'm sure none of you will next week. For traders, while I think of it, Thanksgiving in the US is next Thursday, and markets are closed. They're open on Friday, but they're only open for a half day. And Jerry tells me that Wednesday is almost non-existent. So you're going to have have the markets effectively not doing anything with any conviction on possibly Wednesday. Thursday they're closed. Friday's a half day. You don't get back into the markets again till Monday. So whatever open positions you've got on Wednesday, best suggestion is you close them. Get flat and go and enjoy your Thanksgiving. So here's the UK. They've been having a bit of fun. They've taken out the '07 highs pretty convincingly. Haven't got the dynamic that we've seen in the States, but it's been okay. It's good. Everyone's having a good time, I gather. And this is the Australian share price index, the SPI, and it sort of got halfway back to its 2007. Top. So I've said this is Australia's halfway to happiness, but Australians, the public, like the public everywhere, are pretty much illiterate to markets, which is a shame, and they shouldn't be, because we have compulsory, what's called superannuation in Australia. It's a form of compulsory saving, and 9% is taken out of your pay packet without your consent and put into a managed fund, and there's various ones. Some are run by industry, some are run by big investment banks, but it's not optional, it's mandatory. 9% of your wages comes out of your pocket every week and goes into your superannuation. And if you happen to be a public servant, it's even more generous. It's 14% because your employer pays an equal amount. So that's how it's sold as being of some benefit. The reality is the management of these funds by and large, leaves a lot to be desired. It's a very sensitive topic. I don't want to annoy anyone particularly, as it's Friday morning and a beautiful, glorious, sunny day down here. It's just gone midday, actually, in Australia, and I don't want to give anyone indigestion for the weekend by talking about how these managed funds handle your money. Mike Olenek telling me my dates are off on the chart. Well, could be. I was doing these at 5 o'clock this morning. Mike, forgive me. Anyway, that's Australia. Let's have a look what we've got as we move along. And this is Hong Kong. You're going to see a really, really interesting contrast. Hong Kong, for those of you who don't sort of follow what's happening in that part of the world, Hong Kong's was a British island for many, many years. It's a Chinese island. But was governed by the British for generations, and it's just off the coast of mainland China. It's now been given back to China when it got its independence. It's now a part of China, but it's run on a sort of a semi-free enterprise basis. And in that part of the world, free enterprise really does mean free enterprise. I spent 6-7 months in Hong Kong. It's a fantastic place to do business. Really great. Tax on earnings made in Hong Kong when I was there was 2%. Tax on earnings made outside the territory, as they call it, was 0. Wonderfully conducive atmosphere for businessmen. Anyway, look, they took out their old high. They're off a bit now. They're sort of back in the middle. And then this is mainland China. This is the Shanghai Composite Index. There's a few of them. This is a really broad one. And as you can see, they've sort of doddering around in the bottom quartile of the 2007 spike. And not so good, not so much fun in China, but that only tells you part of the story, because you need then to have a look at how currency markets have viewed what's been happening in the last 10 years or so. This chart starts from 99, and this is the DX. This is the US dollar index. This is the US dollar measured against a currency basket of other currencies that it trades against, and it's weighted. But basically you can see George Bush managed to preside over the largest fall in value in the dollar in recent times. Obama, if you look at what's happened to the currency in his time, there's a bit of truth in what he says, that Trump claims the credit, but it all started with Obama. There's a bit of truth in that. And we can see what's happened with Trump. It's been up and down and back in about mid-range now. Now, we know that Mnuchin and therefore presumably Trump, they're both mercantilists. They would favour a much weaker dollar because a weaker dollar helps American exporters and mitigates against imports become more expensive. So that's what's happened with the currency there. This is the UK. And this is what's happened with under Cameron and then Mrs. May, and pretty much doom and gloom in the currency markets. There we are there, and this is what's happened in Australia. Extraordinary. Back in 2010-11, the Australian dollar was 8% stronger than the Aussie dollar. I couldn't believe it. The number of times I said, I don't know what they're smoking. But it went on for a long time, you know. It stayed up at those levels from about August 2010, November 2010, all the way through till early 2013. Absolutely extraordinary. No idea why. Interesting to see what's happening now. The market had a nice jump down to 70.2 recently, and Reserve Bank support. The plunge protection team. Everyone's got one. Some of them have got more than one. And yesterday was a 14,000 day in GBP Aussie dollar in about 6 hours. Good, we're coming to that. Oh, no, we're not. I don't know if we've got GBP Aussie. It's one of the ones we're looking at today. But anyway, the bottom line is that the Reserve Bank, which is part of the Australian Plunge Protection Team for currencies, I think they've got 70 as their benchmark. It's down to 70.2. It's been down lower than that. It's been down below 68. But they're holding it. That 70 seems to be the holding line now. Australia has had the world's greatest property boom, and it's been totally insane. If I told you that the average price of a big city like Sydney, average, was over $1 million, I'm sure you wouldn't believe me, because I can't believe it myself. There are parts of Sydney, I lived there for most of my life. Very, very beautiful, the eastern suburbs. Some of the North Shore suburbs are very nice, but the vast bulk of Sydney is to the west, and it's hot. I'm sure it has its appeals. I'm not sure I can tell you what they are, but $1 million average. And the real question for me is, how are people affording this? How are they demonstrating their bank? See, don't forget, in Australia, we don't have any, there's no jingle mail. You can't, if you're underwater on a mortgage, you can't just say to the bank, will you take it over? Once you have a mortgage in Australia, it's personally guaranteed by whoever got the mortgage. You're always the husband, usually the wife as well. And you can't walk away. If it goes underwater, you've got to find a way to make good with the bank, or they'll sue you or garnish you your wages, send you bankrupt, all sorts of things. We've had the most extraordinary property boom anywhere in the world. Sydney is now the second most expensive housing market in the world. And when you look at the average earnings, someone's been telling an awful lot of fibs to get these mortgages up to these levels. And we've just had a Royal Commission at the bank, which just touched on that. It's the equivalent. You had them. There were liar loans in the last great and glorious crash from 2007 down to 2009. You remember there were liar loans, and then there were ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets. We've got a lot of those over here. It hasn't hit yet, but it's going to, and it's going to hit big. It'll take a while to roll out, probably be a year or so, but I've been saying since, certainly I've been saying since 2010 that the Aussie currency should have a 6 in front of it, and it may even be a 5, but it's this is the most overvalued currency in the world. Okay, this is China's currency. This is the yuan. They call yuan renminbi their currency. This is totally managed. China is a command currency, a command economy, where the powers that be can pretty well do what they like with the market. And I put this dotted line on. That's the 7, the magic number 7, which is nothing to do with the 9 dash line, which is the South China Seas episode. This is the 7 dash line. And it is assumed that that's a critical point for the Chinese currency. Chinese currency going up, US dollar, this is the dollar yuan cross. So this is strength in the US dollar means weakness in the Chinese currency. And it's supposed, for a reason I don't totally comprehend, that 7 is a make or break point, and it's very close to it now. We'll see what happens. But of course, China's trying to devalue their currency all the time, because by devaluing their currency, having a cheaper currency means that they're overcoming a lot of these effects from Trump's tariffs. If their currency is cheaper, it's more attractive to buyers. Okay, we'll just have a quick look at some of these Forex markets. We have a lot of people who are very interested in Forex, which we do, of course. We actually started off pretty much as a Forex business and then have morphed across since then. This is the this new Success program. And this is on the Aussie USD. This is a back-end part of the program that actually shows you the trend signals. So the way it works is it is designed to keep you with the trend almost all the time, and it's going to then the volatility of markets going up and down that makes the money for you. And you can see the red dots and the red arrows telling you the trend is down at that point. Blue dots, blue arrows telling you the trend is up at that point. This part of the program doesn't create the signals for you. I create them for you. And we're going to start releasing some of these currency signals in Success, which everyone's been pretty keen on. This is the EUR-AUD. I think that's the one I was thinking of, not GBP-AUD, Peter. EUR-AUD, you can see here, this is the Success program on that. You can see that it's sort of been right, kept you with the trend almost all the time. We have various techniques to deal with what happens when you are in a counter trend. This is another Forex chart. This is Success and the TO3 signals on the Euro-GBP. We had the buy signal there for Wednesday. It just got elected, then reversed, and then whoosh, look what it did today. Took off big time. So that seems to be good stuff. This is the Success again. Same things, and our plus signals. You know, we have our TO3 signals, our plus signals, and the blue line signals. The latter two go into the TO3 plus program. And this was yesterday's trade. In the dollar CAD. Same sort of thing. It was elected on Wednesday, rallied way back up, didn't take out the stop, but looked horrible for the day. It didn't look good that night. And then here it is, what's done today. It's finally the pennies dropped a bit belatedly, and it's taken off and going down. This is gold. I told you at the last tutorial that gold actually because it's broken its correlation, its inverse correlation with the US dollar, was technically liable to go higher. And it took a while. It kept going down after that, as our Reading friend would well know. Just bear with me a second, folks. Here we are. Stand by. Harold, this is what happens when you get old. Don't get old. I know Harold so well. I've enjoyed his company. I've eaten in his house. We've had a great time together. Harold's our resident gold bug. He lives in Redding, California. Great man. Passionate man. Person of real quality. And I was telling Harold the last webinar that gold technically should have a decent break up now that it's free of that inverse correlation. But it looks like it's probably slipping back into it. But nonetheless, we had a nice blue line buy, which was elected and went up on Wednesday, and it sort of held those gains Thursday. And this is the success on gold. This is the part of the program that shows you what the trend is. This is not the part that shows you how I create the signals naturally. That's all sort of very complex. Okay, now let's move on. This is silver. Silver's been actually better than gold. The silver-gold ratio has got out of balance. Silver's very undervalued relative to gold, and it looks like it's making a strong effort to correct that. The silver buy was the TO3 buy. For Wednesday, it was elected, and then today, whoosh, it's given some value in there. So silver should be stronger than gold as it works to attend to that correlation. This is success on the UST bonds and the Daniel Code blue line trade, right down at that near that 137 low. Pretty good. That's made $1,200 on a fairly small margin, that market, and fairly slow and sleepy, but that's a nice trade. I hope you all filled your boots up on that. Now, folks, don't forget the correlation signals. Those of you who haven't been with us for long, some markets are very, very highly correlated. Gold and silver and the Huey, which you can't trade futures on the Huey, that's the unhedged gold producers index, but you can trade options on it. Gold and silver and the Huey are so highly correlated that they tend to move in the same direction better than 96% of the time. It doesn't say they've got the same quantum, because all of these signals are silent on quantum, but they move in the same direction. So if you get a signal in silver, you can buy gold. You can execute that signal in gold if you want to, and vice versa. If you get a signal in Huey or gold, you can execute it in silver if you want to, so long as the trade is elected. That means it has to go to the number that we specify where this trade becomes valid. This chart, this is the S&P, and it's been a bit messy lately, but quite clear to us. But this is something I want to refresh your minds on. This is looking at a chart for correlations. What you're looking at is the S&P, but the signals you're looking at came from the Russell. And the equities, Russell, Dow, NASDAQ, S&P, and Germany's DAX index are also correlated, that you can take an order, a signal in any one of them can be executed in any other if you wish, and if the trade is elected. So this is the Russell signals. We had a buy that took us up to 2,800, up to the blue line. Those of you who've done tutorials know about the biggest bar that ends at the blue line. Say thank you, take your profits and leave. And then the Russell sell, a TO3 sell in the Russell, and back near the high, and down to today's close, $3,000 for nothing. Well, that's probably going to be up tonight because they liked it Friday night. The market makers usually try to paint the tape, as they say, make it a happy weekend. At least Friday historically on the S&P's had a very, very high propensity to go up. And then, of course, next week you're going to lose effectively 3 days with the Thanksgiving trading. So, there'll be people who say, oh, great, we're getting a break, we can go home for Thanksgiving. There'll be the people like me who say, oh, That's not so good. We're going to lose 3 trading days. What am I going to do? Sit here and be bored out of my mind? No. There's always work to do. There's always work to do. But don't forget about these correlated signals. You can take the signals from the Russell and execute them in the S&P. Or you can take the signals from the Russell and execute them in the Dow. Or you can take the signals from the Russell and execute them in the NASDAQ. And the same for all the others. A signal in any one of those markets, Dow, NASDAQ, S&P, Russell in particular, can be executed in any other because they are highly correlated. Just want to remind you about that. This is this big daddy trade of them all. This is the crude oil trade. We've been in and out and in and out, and this trade has returned $17,400 odd from the second time we got short. We actually got short up here, right? This first bar out. We were short for a couple of days there, then little rally we were long, and then short again now. As you look down this chart, there's a couple of them are inside bar entries, a couple of them are 1 or 2 day counter trends, which we reverse on because the signal that gives you a 1 bar counter trend is exactly the same as the signal that gives you a trend ending signal. So the only, as far as I know, they are, and the only way to deal with them is to take every trade and have good management processes. So if you're taking a trade against the trend, you're risking less than if you're taking a trade with the trend, where we are more generous with our stops. One of the points I've got up here on this chart is I've said let's talk about inside bars. Now, with inside bars, they're very interesting. I don't want to bore you to death with the theory. When in forecasting, inside bars are vital, but in day-to-day trading, creating signals, they can be vital, or they can be a null or a void. In other words, a nothing. Essentially, what causes inside bars is all markets have their own internal time clock that they're running to, and it's not something we would recognize as being at all rational or predictable. But when the market thinks it's got ahead of itself, it's gone too fast, it starts putting in inside bars to waste some time, to get back to its proper timing. And that's a bit like running on the spot, which most of you did at school, or anyone who's been in the military knows all about running on the spot. There's lots of action, but no momentum. So it's going up and down and nothing's happening. On the website, because that's built primarily for newer traders, I say if you have a signal from an inside bar, don't trade the high or low of the inside bar. Make your entries at the high or low of the last bar that was not itself an inside bar. And that's a recognition that inside bars often give you something like this, followed by an outside bar, which has you wrong on the buy, and then you have to do a stop or reverse to get short. Down here, there's another 2 of them. These are also 1 bar counter trends, which give you permission to re-enter with the trend. But with trading inside bars, if you haven't done a tutorial, some of them, if there's sort of not a lot of difference in size between the inside bar and its predecessor bar, which will be the setup bar, the bar immediately before it, you can trade the high or the low. You can make your entry and your stop based on the high and the low of the last bar before the inside bar that was not itself an inside bar. When you become a better trader, you have to trade the highs and lows of the inside bars. That does lead you into more false trades, but we know how to manage trades against the trend. So it's not a big risk. It's a very controlled risk. But think that through. If you've got any questions, shoot me an email. It's very important that you can handle inside bars properly. Okay, Janet, my question, somebody said, I was talking to them, I said, well, does anyone ever actually get these trades? I said, of course they do. All the Daniel Code tutorial folks get the trades. And this is an email that came from Janet from Maple Ridge in Canada, who I know is with us today. If I can find it. Jen Yu has arrived with us. Jen, hello, welcome. Special welcome to all the ladies who are with us today. Janet wasn't here when we started, so where is she? Let me see if she's arrived. No, she hasn't. Oh, she said she'd be here, but she's not. Maybe she's going to watch it on replay. So, She's talking about the trade she's taken. She's a lovely lady. She lives in Canada. She fell over on some slippery ice a couple of months ago and broke her ankle. Same questions I was talking to Chris about living in New York. Why do you live in places where there's bloody ice to fall over on? I don't know. Anyway, good luck to you. And she's all right now, I hope. I've spoken to her. This is an email she sent me. Got a question. She got the first two parts of the crude short. She made 8,200. And is it possible to get back in after the November 5? That was a little counter trend. But I want you to see that, because people say you just only tell us all the good stuff. Well, no, I don't. I'll tell you all sorts of stuff. In fact, I'm going to show it to you now. This is the one. The answer to Janet's question, incidentally, which I didn't show you. Yes, it's really easy. She came back and said, oh, gee, I knew that. I must have been tired and missed it. This is one that doesn't look so clever, does it? This is the one that got away. This is natural gas, and I want you to just have a look at those 4 bars that are inside the little red box there. We had a gap up, and then 1, 2, 3 bars inside that range. If you change from the high-low, open, high-low, close chart to the close-only chart, this chart just is charting closes. You'll see what I'm talking about in that red box. You've got 3 or even 4 closes that are almost all on a straight line, going pretty much sideways. Now, that's normally that's an indication that you're going to get some congestion, or you're going to get a sideways correction. When I see that pattern, I will generally get out, which is what I did with the 6S. We traded all that, and 6S was pretty nice. And after the second day of that consolidation, I said, get flat. Flat is also a position. So we missed the great big run up. So, no, I don't only show you the good news. I tell you the good and the bad. And all traders make mistakes. That's one of mine, caused by having too much caution. But cautious traders tend to live for a long time, and their bank accounts tend to prosper for a long time. Traders who are not cautious, who are boisterous, who are aggressive, super aggressive, they are all shooting stars. They do very, very well for a while, then they crash and burn. So that's not an option to choose. Choose the conservative way all the time. But I certainly did leave us out of that great big blow-off trade on the 6S. Big question from everyone is the market finished? Is that over? I talked to you about this a couple of weeks ago. The market, in my view, this is a 12-day chart, 2 weeks for the uninitiated, 12 days in the Daniel code. Each bar is 12 trading days. It needs to make a close below the significant low before the high. And that has been the signal in the past that bull market's over. It hasn't done that yet, but it's now. This is S&P, and this is the index, incidentally, folks. Don't get confused with the index and the futures contract. There's a few points difference between them. There's now a significant low in the S&P at 26.28 on the index. If we get a close below that, I suspect that's going to cause some consternation to those people who care about it. We don't care about it because we get paid exactly the same if the market's going up or going down. So I get besieged with letters, emails. Do you think the bull market's over? Well, actually I don't, but I could care less because we get paid the same way. If we happen to have we've had a 10-year bull market, if we have a 10-year bear market, that'll be just fine with me because we make money, futures traders, we make exactly the same with the market going down as we do the market going up. However, markets tend to go up by the stairs and down by the escalator, is the old saying, meaning when the market's going down, you tend to get paid with a bit more urgency and but certainly much quicker. Anyway, so this is the NASDAQ, which has been the key driver. I just want to point out to you that way back here in January, February, March, April, let me see, get a line through here, April, the NASDAQ hit this dotted red line, and that's 3 standard deviations from the mean. Now, they're not normal standard, mathematical standard deviations, they're Daniel code standard deviations, they're a bit of a difference. But it hit that level 3 standard deviations from the mean on the upside. And you've heard me talk about Newton's laws of motion before, that the third law is that every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if we hit that third level, the third Daniel code standard deviation at the upside, it should eventually correct and hit 3 standard deviations below the median, which it's done now. And that's where it's sitting, not far above it. So that has all been done that had to be done. I know if you're not used to looking at these charts on the angle, these are not linear, these are angular charts. If you're not used to looking at them, it all seems a bit crazy. You say, well, let's talk about it, mate. 5-6 months of high highs after that. But when you get used to reading these angular charts, they're very, very good, and they're actually a lot more accurate than normal linear charts, because they are combining two things. They're combining on the angle, they're combining time and price. Every one of these bars has a price high-low and a time number as well. So watch what's happening with the NASDAQ. It's done everything it had to. If it goes up from here, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But a close below 6306 will be time to make sure that your Friday night cocktail parties are with futures traders, not people with shares, because they'll be jumping off the bar at least, and eventually some will start jumping out of windows. Okay, Mike, good to have had you here. Folks, we've got coming towards the middle of November now. We have 2 places available for Daniel Code tutorials for the rest of the year. If you'd like to get your tutorial done before Christmas, shoot me an email straight away, jneedham@thedanielcode.com. And we've managed to have a great year teaching people. And if you want to learn all about trading price, but more importantly, trading time, trading the time signals, they're just sensational. You should be signing up for a Daniel Code tutorial. The fee is $7,500. It will take you anywhere from a month to 6 months, depending on how much spare time you have to do the paper trading. I've got 2 spaces left between now and Christmas. Shoot me an email if you'd like to get your trading all buttoned away, ready to take on the world in the new year. And let's see what we've got. Yes, if you haven't already had a free trial with Jensen's Trade Navigator or with us, you're most welcome to. Just click on the link on the website at www.thedanielcode.com, and you'll be good to go. This is our compliance statement, which I like you to read. Basically, it says you can lose a lot of money trading. My take on it is you lose all your money real fast if you don't know what you're doing. If you've done a Daniel Code tutorial and you understand trading, you'll make a lot of money equally fast. But I beg of you, don't think this is something you can learn off the internet for free. I thought you could. I tried that. Being an attorney, of course, you learn from books and lectures and some practical material. I tried to do the same with trading, and it doesn't work. You need to be taught by someone who does know what they're doing and what actually makes markets turn. Okay, well, thank you for being with us. That was great. We're 5 minutes over time, which is pretty good for us. We're usually over time. And for Harold, if you're still here, this is for you, my friend. This last chart of the day, I wanted you to see it. This is gold. This is your weekly gold chart. G'day, Mark Murph. Thanks, mate. This is the gold chart. If it looks like it's got a lot of stuff on it, it has, because I've been showing you this thing for 10 years. But we got resistance at the 1243 Daniel Code level. It's a bit more accurate than that on the 6-day chart. This is a normal weekly chart. And we've now, it's hit support. It's on its way back up. A close above 1243, a close on the weekly chart or the 6-day chart above 1243 will be the signal that there's at least another leg up, and maybe a whole lot more. So keep an eye, particularly, Harold, on that gold US dollar correlation. If that breaks down, probabilities are immense for gold. And as you know, I'm not a gold booster. It's just a trading commodity to us, but we have some insights into it. All right, thanks for being with us, folks. Next week I won't be talking to you until after you've had your Thanksgiving. So I bid you have a safe and wonderful Thanksgiving. Eat as much as you can, be as bad as you can, and I look forward to talking to you after Thanksgiving when we have our next webinar. Bye-bye for now.